Hello and welcome to the Giraffe Social Media Podcast. It's what social media managers are talking about. I'm Caitlin McKenzie and today I'm joined by some lovely members of the Giraffe team. We've got Senior Social Media Manager Dom.
Hello.
And Social Media Assistant Chloe.
Hi.
So this week's episode is going to be slightly different to usual. We've taken this December moment to jump into your ears and have a look back over the year of 2020 and some of the sort of bananas things that happened. I started doing the deep dive today to really look back, and the guys can attest. We were meant to record this podcast much earlier in the day, but I couldn't because I was still only in March. March was a big month, so you'll have to bear with us and enjoy the random ramblings of what happened in 2020 because I'm pretty sure that's how it's gonna go down. But first, before we get into the mix of it and throw things back, guys, how was your Christmas? Chloe, what did you get up to?
My Christmas was actually really good. A few days before when old Boris announced that, the new tiers and things, my plans kind of got a little bit ruined. I was supposed to go and see my auntie in the Midlands, and then we couldn't. So I ended up going to see some of my partner's cousins who live here in Brighton. And it was really nice. It was really fun. I was a bit nervous not spending it with my own family, but they are like second family to me, so it was really great.
Oh, that sounds really sweet. Dom, how was yours?
Yeah, same. Mine was nice considering, to be fair. Like before the tiers were announced, we got our nan over to our house, so she wasn't by herself for Christmas. So that was nice having nan there. But yeah, we ate a lot of cheese, a lot of chocolate. Still got a load of turkey remaining. But yeah, all things considered, it was really nice. It was.
That's so true about the turkey. Our fridge is crammed, and we did like 2 different meats as well. So there's so much. We've had like turkey soup, we've had turkey pizzas. And like now we're just getting to the point where we're like, is it okay to let it go? But yeah, lots and lots of eating. My Christmas was much the same. We live fairly remotely, so we didn't see any family. But I'm lucky to live with my mum and dad, so we sort of just kept it casual, and just chilled out, watched the movies, ate the things, opened the presents. Yeah, it was nice. It was like one of those, like you say, Don, it was like nice considering. It could obviously could have been different, but under 2020 standards, it was, yeah, good. Well, I'm
I was
glad
a
you guys.
little bit. I was a little bit disappointed with the Christmas TV. Normally like channel one, two, three, and
Mm.
four. Just normally we'll just have really movies all the time and just yeah. But I just thought this year just wasn't as good. But that's just my opinion. Don't know what I
Oh.
was expecting, but yeah, I just felt like I don't know. Just they didn't
No,
put as
I
much effort. I felt.
I get what you mean. I guess maybe part of it was like obviously they maybe couldn't make as much stuff in like the early part of the year that they maybe would have. But I mean, I just sort of we ended up watching loads of TV. We don't usually, but it was really horrible weather here, so we couldn't go for a walk or anything. So I ended up watching like Coco, which was on BBC One, and oh my goodness, I just cried the whole day. Like whatever movie came on, I was like, oh god, it's happening again. Just had a little weep. Or like the movies, but I was surprised they weren't very Christmassy. Everything was like good,
Yeah.
but not really Christmassy. But yeah. Chloe, you'll be very pleased to hear that in like this sort of weird no man's land between Christmas and New Year's, my family are doing a Star Wars marathon. It's
Ooh,
so good. I forgot how
nice.
good they were. Like even some of the ones that aren't that good, they're still great. What fun to watch. So yeah, premium watch day. We're just extending that sort of feet up glass of red wine for as long as possible. Okay, guys, well, I think it cannot be put off for any longer. It's time to cast our minds back to yesteryear, to January, the start of 2020, an interesting time for all. I mean, the biggest thing that I found when I was looking back was, of course, the bushfires that were happening in Australia on like a pretty catastrophic scale. Um, I think it's quite funny. No, it's not funny at all, but at that point, it was definitely like the worst thing I think we thought were going to happen. We were like, wow, 2020 is like already as bad as it can possibly be. Lol. It's it managed to top it. But yeah, what was the bushfires like for you, Chloe? Because obviously you're Australian, you have family over there.
Yeah, I felt kind of bad because I had just started working here, so naturally everyone was
Mm.
asking me about it, and I just didn't. I wasn't really following it, so I was like, "Oh it's
Hmm.
pretty bad. I felt like the Brits were a bit more informed than I was, but it was kind of scary. I know a few people who were very close to it. I follow a few people on Instagram who, unfortunately, like their homes were destroyed, and at one point it was quite close to where my parents lived. So yeah, it was kind of a scary time, and definitely, I think it's funny that we all did think that was the worst thing that was going to happen. But yeah, I think we got some good memes out of it because in the midst of it, Australian Prime Minister decided to hop on a plane and go on holiday in Hawaii while it was on fire, quite literally. So I
Oh
don't
wow,
know.
there's a lot of memes to come out. I think I listened to a few Australian podcasts and they have echoed your sentiments about a few things. Well, I'm sorry to target you there as our like token Australian. So you, it's like British.
I'm sorry I couldn't reply more.
It's like when
Sorry I
people
had to
meet
choke
British
you.
people and they're like, "Do you know the Queen?" We're like, "So, can you tell us about everything that's happening in Australia?" Also, interesting. I think that was like the start of like social media fundraising. I think this year, like because a lot of people got into that, and I, looking back, I was really surprised to see how widespread the fundraising was in like really random arenas, like small village halls in tiny villages in the UK were like hosting major fundraisers for Australian bushfires, which I don't think we've maybe seen on the same scale, and obviously across social media too. One notable thing that I recalled and sort of came across when I was doing my research was there was a very high profile, I don't have names, I know that actually descended into scandal, but there was a high profile OnlyFans user who was selling her, you know, wares in aid of fundraising efforts, and she raised a lot of money. She actually, there's other scandal and stuff associated with her individually, which we're not going to give the airtime, but that I think was the first time I heard of OnlyFans, and the fact that now it's like such a massive part of our culture, I thought it was like interesting to maybe kind of pinpoint the start of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, yeah, OnlyFans really blew up this year, didn't it? And it probably was around the same time. I think I was listening to a podcast when I was first introduced to it, maybe a bit later in the year, but
Hmm. Well, there was a few sort of run-of-the-mill social media trends, which I want to remind you of. There was the LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Tinder trend. Don't know if you remember, but it was like four images, like tiled together, and it was like your professional face, your Facebook face, your Instagram like baddie face, and then like your Tinder one. And like people like Dolly Parton were even doing it, which was pretty hilarious. But any excuse to share four selfies, but that was a good one. There was also an Into the Unknown social media trend with like people singing Into the Unknown and going off on like random tangents at the end of it, like ahead of the release of Frozen 2. That was a moment. Lizzo was on the cover of Rolling Stone in January. There were some good things. And there was this strain of this virus called coronavirus in China, which was documented, but it like wasn't a big deal over here. It was never really going to happen in the UK or other Western countries. Do you guys remember when you first heard of it? I remember not thinking it was a big deal like at all.
Hmm.
I remember, oh, sorry, because this girl that I follow on Instagram who has like a really large and impressionable following was posting these videos that now I think she and everyone realized were not related to coronavirus, but she was basically fear mongering and showing people like on the street in China just like collapsing and having these like seizures, which like we know
Yeah.
now that's not what happens to it during
Hmm.
like when you have coronavirus. And I still kind of hold a grudge to this day because like the level of responsibility some people hold and just like completely misuse and like spread this kind of like fear and misinformation, and even got me like
Mm.
really terrified. And like now obviously we know that that's not the case, but well, it is still scary, but it wasn't what she was showing. So I think that's important to note, like that was
Happening.
also like probably
Yeah,
worse. And
definitely. I
yeah.
remember seeing loads of videos of people, because obviously it started in like a wet food market. And I remember seeing lots of videos of people sharing random content of people eating like bats or like animal like feet and things like that in Thailand, and so just random content that was shot of people like trying this animal food and then thinking, and then with kind of with the caption like so and so got coronavirus. Yeah, it really reminded me of like that weird time where people were just sort of posting anything, and that has not aged well,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah. It was one of those things, wasn't it? It was like you heard of it, and then you didn't really think too much of it to begin with. Well, I mean, no one else anyway couldn't predict the
Mm.
scale of what happened to become an actual pandemic. I don't think you would have thought that we would see that in our lifetime. But the fact that it actually happened, and I think at first people didn't take it too seriously. I know for sure, like to begin with, I didn't take it too seriously.
Mm.
And then when you start hearing like the news of how bad it got in Italy, and all over the news how badly it was affecting people and how it was spreading to everywhere, and then how it eventually
Mm.
come to the UK, that's when it was really, really serious. And I guess that's when
Yeah.
life and social changed
Mm.
in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when the signs went up at my university. I was just finishing up uni in the spring, and there were like signs like, if you've recently traveled to Wuhan, blah blah blah, and that was like the extent of it. And I thought it was kind of going to be, I don't know, you see those signs for like meningitis in like an educational place or in like the doctors and stuff. Like you could get it at uni, like that kind of thing. Like, oh, it's bad, and obviously it's gonna be bad for some people, but no biggie, right? Turns out it was a biggie. And you know what? That was probably one of the weirdest things about looking back. Maybe the most soul destroying things when I was like going back through old like Twitter timelines and stuff was people being like, oh, this is bad, but at least in June, I saw one about dating. So it was like matching with someone on Tinder now and you have to sort of have random small talk until June when you get to verify that you're into them in real life. And I was like, ha, June. June did not happen. It's just like the sort of optimism that everyone had that it would just be for the summer, and now it's December. Anyway, I don't need to drag it down too deep, but that was interesting to see the sort of short lifespan that we thought this was going to have, and yeah, it's still going on. Anyway, so February, moving swiftly on. So things hadn't really kicked off in the UK or in the States or anywhere yet, coronavirus wise. So it was award season still, and I was looking back and I couldn't really believe that these award ceremonies were this year. So at the Oscars, Parasite won Best Picture, Director, Original Screenplay, International Feature Film. Joaquin Phoenix won Best Actor for The Joker. That does not feel like 2020 to me. It feels like 2018 or something crazy. The director of Parasite, there's that really famous picture of him with the two Oscars, like making them kiss. Have you guys seen that? And I've seen people reshare that in like October, being like, this was the last good thing that happened. There was also the BAFTAs, where Rebel Wilson made a really quite iconically outrageous speech, which was quite interesting. She was introducing the nominees for Best Director, and she absolutely dragged the movie Cats, as well as everything else, and several other individuals. So in March, a few interesting things that happened that you might remember. Joe Lycett legally changed his name to Hugo Boss in defense of a small beer company that was being sued by the real Hugo Boss, and like all hell broke loose. It was like really big on Twitter. He was doing it for his like TV show. That was a moment. A funny thing that happened in Wuhan, a bit of light perhaps, was school children took down the app that was being used to assign them homework by spamming it with 1-star reviews until it was taken down from the App Store, which was pretty hilarious. This one was maybe when I was like, oh, this virus is real. Tom Hanks announced that he had coronavirus. Do you guys remember that?
Oh yeah, I do. I do.
Did you say, what was that, Chloe?
Oh, and he was in the Gold Coast at the time, which is in Australia, near where I used to live. So that was
A great moment for the Gold Coast. So the virus actually took quite a big hold in Italy in that time, and there was like mass pasta shortages, obviously, as went on to happen in the UK. But there was one very sweet and sad video of an old Italian man. I don't know if you guys caught it. He was outside the supermarket, speaking in Italian about how there hadn't been this much panic even in World War II, and he just couldn't believe it. And that video went very viral. On the 23rd of March, the UK went into lockdown. Do you guys remember seeing that briefing for the first time? I remember it was a very like sad and ominous event in my household, at least. I remember we were on FaceTime to one of our friends, and I was living with a couple of pals at the time. We were sort of gathered in one girl's bedroom to watch as Boris like sat down and addressed the nation, and that was very horrible, really. I think I maybe got a little bit upset. It was like watching the announcement of war or something. I was like, I'm living through a historical event and I don't want to, like that kind of vibe. Do you guys remember where you were back then?
Yeah, it was mad, wasn't it? I was at home, like I said, with my family, and it was one of those where you start thinking, oh, when am I going to see, my girlfriend again? When am I going to see all my other family again? Because it was sort of that unknown of when this was actually going to end. And it did go on for quite a long time, didn't it?
Mm.
And it was the fact that like literally everything, like schools, gyms, people rely on these, especially gyms. Anything to do, whether you go attend yoga classes, anything like that. People they need that for their mental health. Just being able to go to work, you just won't be able to do that
Mm.
whatsoever. It was literally just you're confined into your own house, and it was mad. I mean, you allowed out, weren't you, to exercise, walks,
Yeah,
and
that
stuff
1 hour a day.
at 1 hour
Was
a
it one
day.
hour or one time a day? I just remember everyone turning on each other like, well, Susan's been out twice today, and that was a dog walk and a trip to the shops. Like,
Yeah,
very pathetic.
I found the other
yeah.
day when we came back into winter again, I was sort of put on this coat that I hadn't worn since last winter, and I went into the pockets and I found the last train ticket I had bought to go to work at Giraffe HQ before it all happened, and I think it was like sort of end of February date, and I just thought that is so crazy that I haven't like been to work and physically seen everyone. And like in February I was still new, whereas now I've been here for almost a year, so it's crazy to think. But I don't know if you guys have seen on TikTok, there's this trend where you post something on your from your camera roll from March the 13th, which is apparently the day that
Oh.
coronavirus really, everyone was like, okay, shit, like this is real. And you post kind of what you were doing that day. And some people were at concerts, some people were like, out on the street watching like street performers, like doing all this stuff, which
Wow.
is just like such a no right now.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's a bit eerie to think that it's been that long since we've had a kind of sense of normality.
Yeah, and you take
Yeah.
take a lot of things for granted, don't you? Just like meeting up with friends and going for a coffee, little things like that. Especially like because a lot of people obviously ended up going on furlough, didn't they? So a
Mm.
lot of people couldn't work. Although I think at the beginning a lot of people probably thought that was amazing, but then it dragged, and
Yeah.
for some people it's still dragging, and you know ultimately it ended up in people losing their jobs. You know,
Yeah, it's sad time. It's
companies that
such a weird year to look back on.
yeah
It's
for
so weird
sure.
to think like from that date where we all sat down and we're like, oh, it'll be over in a minute, and then
It's
minutes.
probably weird to think that that date is probably the closest date we'll have to returning to normal. Like it is going to be at least a full year before,
Yeah.
things get better. So
I saw a tweet not long ago and it hit me big in the sense that it was like when that feeling when you realize that it's March again in 3 months. I was like, what? This year has literally gone like January, February, March, quarantine, Christmas, in my opinion. So, other things that happened in March following the lockdown, the owner of Louis Vuitton changed all of their perfume factories to function to produce hand sanitizer en masse, and a lot of other brands went on to do that. I remember Brewdog, I think, did it in the UK. They were selling hand sanitizer. It's really cool to see brands sort of pivot a little bit and sort of see what they could do to help, which I guess was obviously really good for mankind, but also good for brand perception at a time where people aren't shopping and stuff as much. Not that I'm such a cynic. Whenever a brand does something like nice, I'm like, oh, that's so good for your brand sentiment. Well done. Anyway, a very funny tweet that I saw when I was looking back was by @nerdy and quirky, and it was, "This is the exact opposite of that Pokemon Go summer." Do you remember the good old days where everyone was like roaming the
oh my
streets
gosh.
and mingling with their phones? Good times, good times. Is that even still going? Were you guys Pokemon
I
goers?
think
Is
it's
that
had
is
a
that still a thing?
Yeah.
resurgence.
Dominic, absolutely.
Yeah. When it first came out, I was big on it.
Yeah.
Now and again, I still go on it. Like, why not?
Oh, really?
Yeah, why
Oh,
not?
that's cool.
They
I
just
need to give that a
upped.
go.
They just upped like the level. I think it used to be like you could get up to level 40. Now they've upped it to level 50. So all like the hardcore players are like proper back on it to try and reach the maximum level
Mm.
again. Yeah.
That's funny. That was a good time. Also in March was Gal Gadot's very ill-advised Imagine video. Remember that? Diamond in the rough? With all those celebrities sort of in their big fancy houses singing Imagine to the poor people to get them through. Maybe that was just my hot take on it, but that was a moment. Also Zoom and like social distance commentary. That's when that really kicked off. All the jokes about that started rolling out. Like when I was scrolling back through the old Twitter timeline, there was a lot of that. Of course, House Party came out and hit the mainstream. Did you guys House Party? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but
The
House
app.
Party wasn't something that I used. But I tell you what, going
Mm.
back to Zoom, like, do you think Zoom would have ever expected the year that they just had? Like, I think they went from about 10 million daily users to like 300 million daily users,
Wow.
and they like generated like a revenue of like over 300 million. So like,
Hmm.
Zoom was always something that businesses used, but not to where it is now. Like everyone
Oh,
pretty
true.
much use it, all teams like what we use. Like
Mm.
I don't think they ever expected this. And one thing that they did a little marketing campaign. Actually, I think it was back in March, and it was like a Zoom virtual background competition, and it was basically
Oh,
getting people to on Zoom to make like the best background that they can, and obviously the most creative. And then they end up selecting like three winners to win. I can't remember exactly what they won, um, but that obviously got a lot of engagement, and I think that was really cool. Something that
mm.
they used, as a lot more people were using the platform. Yeah, I mean they took advantage of it really.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, to have had shares in Zoom in like February, that would have been a game changer because then
Yeah.
obviously it blew up. I just feel sorry for Skype. Like poor Skype. They
I
had
love
it all.
Skype. Skype had that time in
Uh,
like 2009. I was on that every night talking to my mates. Let
mhm.
Zoom have their moment.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I'm happy for Zoom, but it's just like Skype. Like, what happened, man? You were ready. You've been preparing for this. We were rooting for you. We were all rooting
Oh.
for you.
I actually we had a client who wanted to use Skype for one of our calls the other day, and
Oh
one
wow.
of our colleagues and I were just like, "How do you use Skype? Like, we can't remember how. Like, can't we do this on Zoom, please?" Like,
Literally, it's like someone asking to have a client call on like MSN Messenger,
yeah,
if that's still a thing. Oh, I wish that was still a thing. MSN Messenger would have been great
yeah.
for like the 2020 lockdown. I suppose that's maybe kind of what House Party was trying to achieve. Like for Chloe, if you never used it, it was this app that you had an account on, and you could see when everybody like logged in, you got a little notification that like Dom is in the house, and then you could have like a chat with someone, and if you could, two of your friends were chatting, you could join their chat without permission. It was very like being in a house party, so to speak, digitally if possible. I didn't use it heaps because I remember the first time I used it, I didn't really understand what it was, and my one of my housemates was on it. Like it said, blah blah blah. I was in the house, so I was like, oh, I'm going to chat to her, and she was just like on her bed, like looking at her phone, and she just heard my voice come out of her phone. She wasn't in the app; she just had the app open, and then she panicked, realized it was me, came down and was like, "How did you get into my phone? Like, how are you talking to me?" And I was like, "Ooh, might avoid this." I was like, even when you close the app, you're like, "But is it closed? Is it gone?"
Spooky.
Sort of like after a Teams meeting or a Zoom call, and you like close your laptop and like put it under the bed just in case. Not that I do that. What else happened? So obviously, clap for the NHS. That started every Thursday at 7 p.m. I believe. For quite a long time, that happened. There was a funny tweet, sort of. Well, there was obviously lots of tweets around that, sort of like maybe we shouldn't clap for them, maybe we should give them a pay rise, that kind of thing. But there was also a tweet by @Morgan who tweeted a suggestion that in honor of Amazon drivers, we should all clap out our windows between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. like at any time in this window. Which, all jokes aside, I put that in there and I was like, well, actually, my Amazon driver has been a really big part of my life this year. So maybe they do deserve a clap. Yeah, what else happened? Nintendo Switch launched Amazon. Nintendo Switch launched Animal Crossing. Disney Plus also launched. It was like all of these big companies were like ready with their like
Passionate.
really addictive stuff, and they were like, okay, go. I wonder if that was the actual launch date, or they were like, everyone's in lockdown, let's capitalize, like let's bring it forwards. I don't know. Do you guys any switches? I don't know if that's what they're called. Animal Crossing is.
No, but I feel
No.
like I did have it because my timeline was just consumed with Animal
Oh,
Crossing nonsense. I don't know what it is. I don't want to know what it is. Like, my brain can't take any more distractions. Like,
Oh yeah, for sure. Where would we find the time? That's the reason I didn't get it. Well, I say that's the reason I didn't. I didn't have a Switch, so that was the first reason I didn't get the game. But I was like tempted. I was like, am I missing out? This looks quite fun. But then yeah, you're right. A distraction that was maybe not needed at a time where trying to wrangle your attention span was hard enough.
Trying to like keep my own life afloat. I can't take care of animals
Virtual
right
things.
now.
It was interesting. Quite a lot of brands did little collabs with Nintendo, and I know there were events in the app. I'm not across it enough to really bring it up on a podcast, but I know a lot of brands did have like sponsored islands, I want to say, and like you could go and you could buy customized content in real life to use in the game. So people were like selling attire and stuff for their brand to be worn in the game, which is too meta for my little brain to comprehend. But a good opportunity, I suppose. Also, of course, yeah, Disney Plus launched. That was pretty big for me. I know a lot of my friends rewatched like all of Hannah Montana and stuff just in a bid to reclaim a simpler time. Did you guys get on the Disney Plus hype early?
Yeah.
Yeah, I rewatched Lizzie McGuire.
Ooh.
Yeah, Hannah Montana, that slaps. Watched some of that. Tried like rewatching all my like childhood favorite animation films, and then as soon as like Star Wars like got on the platform, I was just all that.
That was a moment. My family trying to get me to watch The Mandalorian,
Do it.
which is on there. I've caught a couple of episodes. Is it good?
It's good. The first season's a bit slow, but the second season is like incredible.
I think it looks worth it just for the cute baby
Oh my
Yoda,
god.
which I feel like was a really big part of 2020 as well.
Fun fact, my boyfriend's cousins over Christmas bought me a baby Yoda toy, and I weeped. I cried in front of them, which will never live down. And I don't know what came over me. I just cried. I think it's just been a year where I just will cry at random moments, and I can't explain it.
Well, that is a mood. That's very cute. How big is it? Is it
Oh, it's
lifelike?
life size. I was gonna put it. I'm gonna put it on this shelf behind me, so whenever I have client calls, Baby Yoda will just be with me.
Great talking
I'll
point.
send you a photo
Love
after
that.
this.
Fab. So I guess then April rolled on pretty quickly. I say rolled on pretty quickly. Literally, when I was researching what happened in March, that took me time. I couldn't. We got to the original time of recording this podcast, and I was like, I'm still in March. Help. But April, I finally made it through. So on the 1st of April, 2020 was 25% complete. I don't know if anybody else follows at Progress Bar 2020, but I came across it like around that time and was like, okay, I need to know how this is like going. And then I would see it and it would be like 75% complete and I'd be like, almost there. And recently, obviously, it's like 99% complete and it's a joy. It was pretty depressing when it was like around 30% forever. But yeah, interesting account to follow if you want to wish away years of your life. I joke. There was also the don't rush trend. Do you guys catch that? I originally wrote this down as the pass the brush TikTok Instagram trend, which makes me sound about 45, but it was like influencers and models and etc. would like pass a pic, not a paintbrush. What do we put the makeup on? That's how long it's been since we've worn makeup. A makeup brush. Would like do a little glam, have a glow up, and then drop the brush, and it would go to one of their pals. And it was quite good. I didn't participate. There were no glow ups happening in my 2020, but it was definitely a good trend to see. Captain Tom Moore raised £12 million for the NHS. Do you guys remember that?
That was cute. That was really good.
Very, very cute. I've also, my next note is everyone was doing quizzes and happy hours on Zoom, which that is just an understatement. I literally have never done so much trivia in my entire life. I feel like I've managed to dodge a lot of it. I didn't get into like the trap of any weekly quizzes.
Oh, I did.
Like every Thursday. Oh, did you?
Mhm.
Tell us about that.
Every Saturday night, there's a quiz. But yeah, and to be fair, we're still sort of doing it. Not every week, but like it's gonna be one of those like once every other month now, just with family that you don't, you obviously you can't see, you don't really see, so you just have a nice little Zoom call and you throw in a little quiz. Why not? But we've got one coming up for like 2020 quiz, New Year's Eve. So looking forward to that one. I'm actually creating it as well, so that should be fun. But yeah, no, it was that point, wasn't it? Like at the beginning, quizzes was like it was really fun to do, and then it just got to a point where it was like, oh, when do we stop this? Is actually dragging on too much. And then if you did a quiz with like another group, you'd end up finding that you had the same questions from other quizzes that you've had before, and you just become a master at quizzes. So yeah.
I had Zoom
Literally,
fatigue,
like,
like major Zoom fatigue, and I just had to be like, I just can't do this anymore. Like, I just don't really want to sit at my computer like trying to get a word in, because that's the worst thing about Zoom when you have a massive group, which is it's lovely to see all your family, but you just can't. It's not like sitting at a dinner table where you can kind of break off into conversation. Like, you just have to sit through everyone, and then people join late, and then everyone's like, "Oh, hello, Sarah," and it's like, oh,
oh, it's giving me flashbacks.
honestly, I have trauma. Like,
I can see maybe doing one now with family, but the thought of suggesting one to any of my friends, like we've had birthdays and stuff, we were like, well, let's have a games night. Like the word quiz night is sort of banished. Zoom quiz is not allowed to be mentioned, but there could be trivia involved. I mean, the thing is, there is no other option, but I totally get what you're saying. Like Zoom fatigue was a thing, and especially like with working from home, right? You were on Zoom all day, and then all of a sudden you were trying to socialize in the same medium. It just felt like you were glued to your PC. Maybe that was just me, but yeah. What else happened? So I don't know if you guys caught it, but Tiger King fever was also running rife alongside coronavirus. There was also the TikTok song, which was to the tune of Savage by Megan Thee Stallion. I'm not going to sing
I
it.
thought you were about to then. That long pause, I thought you were going to sing.
I know, I considered my brain was like racing to remember the words and then also being like, Caitlin, don't do it. But then Chloe did it, so it's all good. I take it you guys watched Tiger King?
Oh, of course.
yeah.
Yes. Very, very entertaining. I was really late to the party with it, and then I sort of gave up on humanity. It's halfway, like I think maybe even May, and I was like, right, so I just locked myself in my room for I'd say a couple of days. I probably did it in a night, and just watched the whole thing and came out like, what? But I was really late to the party, so none of my friends wanted to talk about it anymore.
Wasn't it like?
But
wasn't it like not long after you had joined Giraffe, we had some like
Oh yeah.
Teams meeting, and you dressed up as Joe Exotic. Like, what a way to say
that's really funny.
no to everybody.
Just for context, like I was new, and it was literally like, I don't know if anyone's seen Mean Girls, but you know, in Mean Girls, when she goes to the Halloween party, major overdressed, it was me. I was like, oh, it's fancy dress. Like, I need to make an effort. I don't want them to think I'm just phoning it in, especially because I hadn't met anyone in real life. Lol. And I can't remember. I think it was just fancy dress, wasn't it? And people like put on a hat or like did a background, and I literally used eyeliner to draw on the Joe Exotic beard. I had a seashell necklace. And did something funky with my eyebrows. I made a fringe. I committed.
That's good.
And well, thank you very much. I'll never do it again. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, that was a moment. I forgot all about that. Wow. So then May was next up. I think it pretty much seemed at that point like New Zealand had just beaten coronavirus, and from May onwards, I just sort of looked across the hemispheres like, oh, that's how it could be. There was obviously a lot of criticism about the UK, how they were handling, like the UK government, how that was handling it. We don't maybe need to dedicate that much time to it because that sort of happened in every month. And we don't need to get into it too much. Of course, one of the biggest things that happened in May were the Black Lives Matter protests and the really horrible incidents that triggered those protests. And of course, there was the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Elijah McCain, to name just a few of the victims whose names deserve to be heard. I wish we could dedicate the whole podcast to it, but yeah, there was so much stuff that came out of that on every platform. I mean, we had to just think about on like a smaller scale, like on individuals, there was the Black Squares, there were people sharing lots of resources. I think there was like negativity around the Black Squares thing because a lot of people were just posting a black square and maybe thinking that was enough. But I remember loads of really good stuff came out of it, like lots of Black-owned businesses that I'd never heard of were brought to my attention just from like scrolling on social media. Lots of people shared resources. Obviously it was an interesting time, but it all played out on social media, didn't it? I remember watching the news and seeing bits and pieces, but then I would open Twitter and I would see like what was really going on, maybe to use that phrase. But yeah, what do you guys remember of that time? It was really intense, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. And I think what was great to see is how everyone on social media did come together to, raise awareness for it. And what's even amazing to see is that it's still continuing. Like, you see football are still
Mm.
taking a knee before kickoff. People are still sharing onto their Instagram stories, like just facts, just to educate people more. So it really is good to see that it wasn't just a phase. It's still strong, and still awareness is
Mm.
still being raised.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was quite nice to see that, like, the amount of noise that were people being made. I know some maybe there was so much criticism flying around, and Chloe, I know we sort of dug into this quite a lot when we did our little podcast, so listeners can go back and maybe listen to that if they want a bit of a deeper dive. But the amount of noise that was made on social media, I think without it, I don't think the results that would have happened. I mean, there was the arrest of the police involved in George Floyd's murder, the reopening of Breonna Taylor's case, to name just a few of the things that happened. Obviously, I'm sure there are plenty of things that more that can happen. But it was interesting, like that momentum. I think it's so easy to view social media as this big negative thing, but it does connect us in a way and achieve things that we maybe would never be able to do otherwise. I don't know why I'm like fighting the case of social media, but you know what I mean. Like, I think it's if there are silver linings to be found, it's always good to notice them for sure. It was definitely an interesting time for brands. I was watching very closely, like which brands said something, which brands didn't say something, how they said it. I haven't actually verified this, but I saw a tweet that said Lego donated $4 million to black charities and pulled like Lego police sets from the shelves and stuff, which was quite interesting. I know a lot of brands like didn't really do anything. Did that like impact your guys' perception at all when you were like seeing people posting or not posting, or was it sort of not as much of a deal? Big deal.
Yeah, I remember there was like a big thing kind of like in the influencer world, where a lot of us, like myself included, we just like stopped posting completely just out of respect and just sort
Mm-hmm.
of reading the room. And there was
Mm-hmm.
quite a lot of talk like within the community of people who were continuing to post brand deals and like sponsored content during such a time. Um, and yeah, I think there's a lot of brands, it was their downfall. A lot of them got a lot of praise. You know,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of like EPs stepped down from like certain businesses, because racist history was dug up. But I think it's important to like check in with those brands that said they were going to do better. I know there are a lot of, and sorry to get really preachy here, I know there were a lot of like
No,
fashion
please.
brands who were like, you know what, we haven't really diversified our models or like our clothes, that kind of thing. We're going to do better. I think it's important for people to just check in with those brands who made such promises to see if they're keeping their word, because
Mm.
it's, as Dom was saying, like it's not a trend. And I know that a lot of brands and maybe even influencers did a lot of virtue signaling during the time to kind of, because it was, I don't know, to repeat the word trend, like I think a lot of people just hopped on the bandwagon. So I think it's
Yeah.
important to like check in to make sure that people are still following through with their word.
And you know what? All these months on, I think that is a really good reminder and a very good point. I've noticed that we're still in May, so I'll move us along to June. Of course, the protests continued. In June was when a lot of like statues and stuff were getting toppled. I think the most notable was when the Edward Colston statue in Bristol was pushed into the harbour. I remember watching that like live streamed and like the chills. Like I just remember thinking like, whoa, this is a moment on history. But yeah, that was pretty huge. So moving on, there were support bubbles were first announced. There was talk of pubs reopening. There was a lot of commentary around that. We had the heat wave, which didn't. I don't think it started in June, but it definitely peaked in June, and that's when all those images of the beaches across the UK being absolutely crammed were being shared. One of the best Twitter threads on a completely different note that I saw, which when I was going back through, I was like, this needs a mention. This is some good news. Sam Darlston on Twitter found some caterpillars on his broccoli from Tesco's and decided to raise them and document it on Twitter. So it was this gigantic thread of like him feeding the caterpillars that he found on his broccoli and then putting them in a little tank, and then they cocooned and then they turned into butterflies and they flew away. And I remember that just moment in history, like I say moment in history after what we've just talked about, but you know what I mean. It was a good moment. What else happened? There was the villain trend. Like, you know, there was the show villain and then the actual villain, which was quite interesting. Maybe that was more of a Twitter thing, but people would have like the Grinch as the villain and then the actual villain was blah blah blah, and it was applied to lots of very entertaining things. We also saw the rise of the phrase Karen. That was a June thing.
It's so funny. It's so funny because my mum is called Karen, so whenever it's like,
Oh no.
whenever it mentions it, she's like, she answers it as it's like, "Oh, what do you want?" Like, as in we're speaking to her, but it's like, don't be a Karen. She's like, what do you mean? It's like, no,
Oh, that is unfortunate. Yeah, the phrase was used to describe a stereotype of mostly a privileged white woman who like demanded to speak to the manager, but it also quickly evolved to describe women in viral videos like calling the police unnecessarily or like refusing to follow COVID guidelines. I remember seeing so many in America of in the States of people in Walmart refusing to wear a mask, and then the Karen narrative just exploding. Yeah, that was
In
a moment.
Australia, Pizza Hut or Domino's, one of them, just put their foot in it. They were like, "Oh, to all the Karens out there, we think you've been really hard done by like this month. Like, if you come in, you can get a free pizza." And everyone was like, "What about all the black people that we would like? Really, Karens, the white Karens are the hard done by, right?" Like, oh, they just got absolutely roasted. It was really hard to watch. Like, just.
Oh my goodness. Do you know what? This has been a year to work in social media. Like, as we've discussed, like, it's the way everyone's been communicating, but all these poor social media managers who are just like sitting and like as the face of the brand, the words of the brand or whatever, having to like come up with initiatives, and it's hit or it's miss this year. There is no in between. But yeah, bit of a faux pas. There was a few of those this year, but time's marching on, so I won't list anymore. A bit of good news was 18-year-old model with Down syndrome called Ellie Goldstein. She starred in a Gucci beauty campaign for Vogue Italia, which went viral and like massively boosted her platform. Really, really beautiful shots, like worth a Google. And then my final note for June was everything was cake. Question mark. Do you guys remember when everything was cake? Yeah, literally. And I remember seeing a tweet that was of Tom Moore getting knighted. Spoiler for one of the following months. And it was like the knife on his shoulder, and it was like, and the moment we realised, even Sir Tom Moore was cake. Oh yeah, I didn't get out much this year. That was entertaining to me, but those hyper-realistic videos of stuff getting cut into broke my brain. So in July, Twitter tweeted that everyone could have an edit button when they started wearing masks, which was quite interesting of the platform to weigh in on that sort of social moment where, I mean, it's still going on, people refusing to wear masks, etc. Pubs reopened on the 4th of July. And do you guys remember Cameo? Or I don't remember, it's not gone, but the platform Cameo where you could like pay a celebrity to get a dedicated message. Are you across that? Dom, have you heard of it?
I've heard, or I can't remember his name now. There's like an old X Factor contestant. I can't remember his name, but he sends out birthday messages, and it's quite funny. But yeah, so I've heard of it.
Do you know, I actually I remember when we first noticed it, it was probably in March or something, we were locked in the house, and me and all my housemates were just scrolling at we couldn't believe the people that were on there, like very Z-list celebrities, like extras in TV shows, but also like small characters in TV shows or movies that you really loved, like the next door neighbor in this TV show. Honestly, it's well worth a scroll. I mean, now there's huge people on it. I remember Caitlyn Jenner is on there, and she's like the most expensive. Maybe that knowledge is a bit outdated, but at one moment she was. But probably the most famous cameo of all time was a British, I think, comedian paid Carol Baskin to do a cameo. Do you? Chloe's face. I feel like a lot of this is Australian themed, and I promise you it is not aimed. But they paid Carol Baskin to do a video to wish Rolf Harris a happy birthday, which she did completely deadpan. Seriously, she didn't know who Rolf Harris was. I think she mentioned a few other like infamous British characters, but I remember watching that for the first time and just like laughing my little head off. And then obviously she released a statement afterwards saying that she'd been like tricked into it, and then blah blah blah. But it looks like you remember that moment, Chloe.
Only because my boyfriend thought it was hilarious, and it was all I heard about for like 2 weeks. Like, he still talks about it. Yeah.
Oh really? Oh well, as we'll find as we move on, other things have happened. August, next up, Eat Out to Help Out was launched. That, I can't remember the deal, but it was, get some money off if you went and ate out to help out, which was then later linked to obviously a spike in coronavirus. I mean, I ate out to help out. I went The timing of that came through. It was like you were saying shock to me eating out to help out. I was like, okay, Dom, thanks. It was one time. Yeah, did you guys went out in August? We were encouraged to. It was a moment, like we were told to. It was a great deal.
Yeah.
It's 3 days of the week, 50% off your meal. I'm there.
That was it. That was it.
I used it like once.
Yeah.
I guess you look at the bigger picture. Was it worth it?
I know. Absolutely not. Definitely not. I think they should have done it, not to criticize, but I think they should have done it on takeaway. Like you'd have still been giving the restaurant money, and I would have got way more takeaways. I like tentatively went out at the end of August and got dinner, and then, but I would have been getting takeaways the whole of August. That's my theory. Anything that can connect me with more reasonable life takeaways. What else happened? So I don't know if you guys caught this, but it was a funny little moment. Carol Kirkwood, BBC weather presenter, tried to say joggers and dog walkers in the same sentence. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's worth a Google. Instagram Reels launched, which I know we have covered a lot on this podcast, in pros and cons, so we maybe don't need to touch on it, but that is when that happened. That was back in August. WAP was released, which was another huge little moment marker in the year, but I can't believe that was August this year. That again feels really long ago. Selling Sunset launched on Netflix, which was an obsession to pass a little bit away that month. 2020 Bake Off was announced, and everyone realized that maybe it was going to be okay. My next note is literally just banana bread. We were making an awful lot of banana bread. September, S Club 7 were deemed illegal under new social distancing rules. That was when like the rule of 6 was rolled into force. Right. I remember like seeing that trend, like seeing S Club 7 trending, and I was like, oh my goodness, there's going to be a reunion. Everything is saved. And actually it was that you could only see 5 of your mates. I saw another really funny meme at the time, which was like Tyra Banks holding the shots that she does at the end of America's Next Top Model, and it's like when you're organizing a gathering with friends, and the caption was, I've only got 5 photos in my hands. You know, some of you aren't going to make the cut. There was of course the 10 p.m. pub close curfew, which obviously caused some sort of mass street parties in certain areas, which we all saw on social media. Catherine Ryan's The Duchess launched on Netflix and went to #1. That was a big moment. Molly-Mae broke the internet with her supermassive giveaway, which I know we've discussed before as well. Chloe, do you not remember that? That was huge. Like she was giving away like crazy goods. I remember it was like Louis Vuitton, everything, but it was probably the biggest Instagram giveaway of all time. And to the point where on every other platform, people were like talking about it, dragging it. It was just, I've never seen it go so far. So great for engagement. I think she was launching a new YouTube channel or something, but
I'm with you now.
yeah, it worked. There was the Ocean Spray Fleetwood Mac kind of accidental crossover with the chap that we discussed in a previous podcast doing his little skateboard, drinking his Ocean Spray Cranberry. That was September. There was Australian TikTok user Christian Hull went viral guessing the colour of paint before it was mixed in the pans. Did you catch that? If you haven't, you have to go and watch that. That was so good.
I think he
Yeah,
lost
it's
his
a
job.
guy.
I think they fired him. Yeah.
Serious?
Yeah, I
Because
think
of
so.
that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw. Yeah.
Oh, well.
Just in, guys. Pretty sure he's jobless.
Bad times. I'm going to have to look that up. Sadly, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died on the 18th. David Attenborough joined Instagram and broke the record for fastest growing account ahead of the launch of his new show, Life on Our Planet, which was, made things slightly better for a brief moment. Although, I've seen a lot of people sort of say that they felt that they were disappointing their grandpa by the end of it. But yeah, also the show My Octopus Teacher, which Dom, I know that you really loved as well as I did. That was September. We all got into our nature. We all returned to nature in September. In October, Instagram Shop was launched and allowed brands to start selling merchandise on Instagram as well as Facebook. October the 3rd, which is obviously Mean Girls Day from that scene. What day is it? It's October 3rd. Was renamed March 217th because that's basically what it was at that stage. There was the how it started versus how it's going trends on all the platforms. I think we did it at Giraffe, did we? We did, of course. Never missing a beat.
May I add?
Oh, there you go. There you go. Yeah, people used it to like celebrate success or like drag the lack of it, which I particularly just enjoy seeing pictures of puppies, like how it started, how it's going, like full-blown doggo. That was a highlight for me. There was Marcus Rashford's Free School Meals campaign, and which really inspired a wave of businesses and individuals to start offering free food initiatives, which was all promoted across social media. I know Marcus Rashford himself was like retweeting lots of it. So yeah, again, another really good thing that happened off the back of the connectivity of social media. What else happened? There was the really misguided Fatima's next job could be a career in cyber government ad. Do you recall?
Yeah.
That was a bad. After everything we'd been through at that point, the commentary that came out of that was unbelievable. Like,
God.
I really enjoyed like people breaking down
Every
all the
job
different
title
artists that were
really
involved in that
bad,
ad.
like-
Literally, and there was a very funny meme which had like the screenshot of Kelly Rowland in the Nelly versus Kelly video with like her little thick little slide up phone with Excel, and it was like me on my job, my career in cyber, because no one calls it a career in cyber, for example. Yeah, that was a moment. There, what Ariana Grande announced a new album, which was a highlight. The clocks went back and it changed nothing. You can see how my notes really descended into chaos by this stage in the year. Judi Dench told the world that she gave her pet fish mouth to mouth. That was a headline. Harry Styles' car broke down outside of a fan's house and he went in and fed their fish. And so fortunately, she wasn't there to meet him, which was sad.
Right.
It really was. There was Halloween, immediately followed by Christmas, which was just as well, as obviously the government went on to effectively kind of cancel Christmas. So it's good that we got in so early. Emily in Paris was released, which obviously Chloe and I have discussed at length on many occasions. Yes, I am racing through now because so much has happened. We've got November. Well, on the 22nd of October, Bake Off launched. On the start of November, Lottie was kicked off of the Bake Off. Did you guys watch the Bake Off?
I did. It was good. I thought it was really good this year.
50-50 result there. Yeah, I caught bits of it. It was just that bit of nice, warm and fuzziness we kind of needed, right? What else happened in November? Biden was named the winner of the US presidential election. I didn't know what month to put that in because I couldn't. It was hard to figure it out. You could kind of. Some camps would agree that January will be the month for then, if you get me. Crown season 4 was released on Netflix, prompting worldwide Diana fever. Any Crown fans in the house? A big one in Chloe Bell Chamber. Have you got as far as the Diana series?
The day it came out, I'm pretty sure I finished it. I love it.
Oh wow! I literally can't believe what's come out of it. Every single podcast I listen to, there has been Diana episodes. It's just been madness. What else happened? So Google review ads went really hard in November as well, and led to us all seeing more of Sheridan Smith and Anthony Joshua on all of our social media platforms than we ever had before, and probably than we'd seen our own friends and family. And there was also that Glee meme bouncing around quite a lot, the Sue Sylvester character, and it's like, I'm going to create a blank, so blank. Did you guys catch that? It was like, I'm going to create a super that is so trooper. You have to look it up, but that was a big moment that happened across Twitter. I really, every time I just explain something or demonstrate something, I'm like, Caitlin, why are you doing this again? December, we are there. We are on the home straits. Elliot Page, the star of hit movie Juno and the Umbrella Academy, used social media to come out as transgender, which was seen as like a really big moment for the trans community, especially in the face of some difficult things that have been happening this year. The Pfizer vaccine was rolled out in the UK. My favourite part about this, and the biggest social media thing I think that came out of it, was the interview that went really viral with the 91-year-old man called Martin Kenyon. I think it made it to TV and stuff eventually, but this American news station interviewed this little old man as he came out after having his vaccine, and it went on for like 10 minutes, and it was, well, the old man himself even said he can't understand why it's so popular. He thought it was deeply boring, but it was just the cutest thing that ever happened. So if you need a little life brightener, just watch him talking about going and getting his lunch, and he rang up the hospital, and it's very cute. He couldn't believe he was newsworthy. Also in December, Ellie Goldstein, who I mentioned earlier, graced the digital cover of Allure, which was super gorgeous and a really nice moment. There were, of course, the Tier 4 announcements across the UK, and the sort of internet delirium that came out of that. like I saw lots of memes of people, you know, tier 17, literally one funny tweet that was like tier 4 wasn't in the revision pack but has turned up in the exam. Like no one knew it was coming. And there was a good meme of Michael Caine in the Muppets Christmas Carol opening his window and being like, "You sir, what tier is it?" Literally just
I saw a good meme. I saw a good meme with Boris Johnson in the helicopter, like pointing out, and it was like tier 10 is Boris Johnson with like a sniper watching for you to come out of your house or something like that. It's brilliant. Oh, it's actually brilliant.
And you know what? That's probably the last thing to wrap up, because now we're up to date and we're all getting completely bombarded with the things that are happening at the minute on social media. So I'm not going to bombard you anymore. This was a review. I feel like that was a bit of a whirlwind, and obviously this is a bit of an extended cut to our usual episodes. But who knew so much happened in 2020?
Oh, what a year!
I'm exhausted. I hope you guys are. Obviously, we have picked out some pretty random things that happened this year, but hopefully you found some funny bits and nice bits to remember. Well, that is all we've got time for today. Thank you so much for listening to our long deep dive into what happened in 2020. We all just want to wish you a very happy new year. We'll be back again next week with some fresh content in 2021. Here's hoping for a better year, eh? We've been Giraffe Social Media. You've been amazing. We will see you next year.